A few years ago, being a farmer was seen as someone who didn't make it, but nowadays things have changed. You see a lot of people out there, small farmers, with new cars, fancy houses. The standard of living for rural producers has gone up a lot. I'll explain why this is happening and how you can benefit or even enter this business yourself, since living in the countryside isn't just for the wealthy and it's not easy to achieve. But I'm going to explain everything to you in this video, how I'm working to try to reach that level and how you can get there too, including the pros and cons of this whole story. So that in the end, maybe you can come up with a plan to get rich. Music. I want to show you my little farm. I made this farm here. In this new system that a lot of people are using nowadays, which is the leasing system. And what is leasing? It's when you take someone else's land, someone who maybe doesn't have time to take care of it, doesn't like farming, and then you take care of their farm in exchange for a percentage. This is good because that percentage is pretty low, usually around 10 to 20%. 20% is too much, to be honest. The right thing is for it to be 10%. But there are some landowners who don't accept 10 and ask for a bit more, like 15, 13, 18, so you have to be careful about this first thing. So, the first step for you to get rich with farming is to find someone who will lease you a good piece of land with a really low percentage. You need to have enough space to plant what you want, and you need to have water. This is a very serious problem. A lot of people think it's just about planting, but man, you need an absurd amount of water to sustain any crop. That's the reality. Unless you're planting eucalyptus, but it's not worth planting eucalyptus on leased land because it takes too long. Eucalyptus. It'll take at least 7 years before you can harvest, and even longer if you want more, so it doesn't make sense. The lease typically lasts up to 20 years, so you'll only harvest once. That's it, so it doesn't make sense. That's why we need a good water source. Here, we had this problem because the water isn't enough. So, you guys may have seen in some previous videos, we're setting up a rainwater collection system to meet the plantation's demand. Actually, I'm filling up the tank here right now. Let me show you. Let me go up here. Look, this is going to be another topic we'll talk about in a bit. The water tank, this has helped me save a lot of money. It's almost full here, and I've already got fertilizer in this water. But you can notice that the water is really dirty, and that's a problem. Because of this, I end up making the pipes a lot dirtier, and that causes me losses. Every loss needs to be accounted for when you're thinking about profit, and that's something serious. If your water is dirty, you're going to have losses with the plumbing. It'll get clogged. You'll have to shut it down, walk around in there, unclogging it. If it's something big and you don't have much time, you might not be able to handle it. Just because the water is dirty, in our case, here the water is dirty because it's rainwater. We collected the water from the last rains, and that's why it's like this. But then, this water tank solves a lot of that problem. I'll even talk about it now for you. This one here is a 10,000 liter tank. I should have installed a 20,000 liter one, and I still plan to do that, to switch to a 20,000 liter tank. And why is it so good? This will help you save a lot on the pump and also on the plumbing system. Look, one of the things you'll spend the most on when setting up a farm like this is irrigation. And if you can save money on the water reservoir, that's going to be great. If possible, those reservoirs that are just a hole in the ground with a tarp are good, but here we don't have that option. These are all things you need to check to see if it's really going to make money, if you'll be able to make a profit, because look at the situation. This is the highest point. There's no way I could make a hole here with water inside because this whole flat area here wouldn't get wet. But we're at a very high altitude. You can see that we're at the same level as the mountains. Over there where the water is, there's a 180 meter difference in elevation. So, to water this whole field with the pump, I'd have two options. Either divide it into many small sections, each with a few coffee plants. Irrigating takes a lot of time, especially since daily watering is needed. And time is money. We all know that, right? You have to consider how much time you have available to take care of your field. You have to look at all of that. But when I use the water tank, the pump stays on for hours and hours to fill up the tank. When it's time to irrigate, I empty the whole tank in about an hour and a half. You can see how much bigger the operation will be. Because the water comes out faster, the pipe is thicker, and that way the tank can deliver more water. This really helps save a lot of time. With this, I spend 90 minutes watering the whole field. Here, it's an area of about 2.5 hectares, which is a relatively small space, but it's 1 kilometer long, so it's not that small. And even so, I can water it in an hour and a half. If you plan to make money with farming, this is something to consider. But the water tank doesn't just solve this problem. This dirt that's here, look, it ends up settling at the bottom because I fill the tank one day and I water the next day. So the dirt goes down and accumulates, then obviously it ends up creating another task that about every 5 months or so. I need to get inside the tank and remove the dirt, but I avoid a lot of pipe clogging. Let me give you an example here so you can understand how this makes my life easier. Here there's a water filter, so the water needs to go through the filter before going to the irrigation, this filter here. It can be used for about a week, almost 2 weeks without cleaning. Because of the decantation down there, at the beginning of the field, we're not going there now. But there's a part that I water directly with the pump, so I save as well. Because in the lower area, the pump throws a lot of water, so it can be done with the pump right there. So the water goes straight through the filter, and that means I have to clean the filter every day. So just imagine the amount of dirt that goes straight through the filter and ends up clogging the pipes. With the decantation system, it's much better. I don't have that problem. But let's get to what you guys are dying to hear. How do you get rich? Nowadays, you can see that most of the people getting rich from farming are coffee producers. And this happened because of the gourmetization of coffee. Coffee is something that's consumed a lot all over the world, and it started to become very gourmet. So the price started to go up a lot. Many people kept their coffee, and last year, coffee prices soared to over 2,000 reais per sack, an unprecedented increase. People expected it to reach 3, but it didn't. It dropped and kept declining. The issue is, when it surged, people got excited thinking they'd get rich. And really, you see that if the sack was at 2,000 reais, it would be easy to make 100,000 reais on a small piece of land with coffee. But that's not sustainable. The end consumer doesn't accept a price at that level. That's why it dropped again, and I don't believe it will return to that 2,000 level anytime soon. But since people saw that the price was way up, everyone went crazy and started planting, and now that's where the problem is. Maybe it's not a good idea for you to think about coffee, because there's already too much. I'll give you an example here. Look around me, this is all coffee, back there, all coffee, everything is coffee. If you look back there, it's coffee up there too. Everything, man. I can't see anything but coffee. Maybe a little bit of eucalyptus up there, but almost everything is coffee. People really went crazy planting 200,000 coffee trees. And what about that? For sure, in 2 years, which is when it will start producing in large quantities, it's going to have a big impact. In other words, the trend is for coffee to stabilize like any other crop, a crop that you produce, and it gives you a return. Because nowadays, coffee gives about 40 to 50% profit considering the expenses and if you do most of the labor yourself, but this won't last. That's why it was such a widely produced crop and so many people were getting into it, because it had a profit margin so high that no other investment could match. I'll give you an example with some numbers here. This little coffee field here starts where the forest is, and it goes about the same distance that way, you know. The same distance from here to there is from here to there. In this section, we've planted 2,000 coffee plants. It's not the whole field, it's just this first planting that I did. And then we're going to do a basic calculation, which is what people use to figure out how much money they're going to make. So let's suppose that for every 10 coffee plants, we harvest 1 sack of coffee. There are people who get much better results than that. Here in our region though, we haven't been able to. There are other coffee fields planted just down there that haven't even reached 10, but let's use 10 for our calculation because it's easy to do in our heads. So 2,000 coffee plants at 10 plants per sack. For 1 green sack, that's going to be 200 green sacks, and from those 200, we usually need between 3 and 4 green sacks to make 1 standard sack. That's the price you already know out there. So let's suppose it's 4. 200 divided by 4 is 50. In other words, in this area you saw here, I can harvest 50 sacks. If it works out, there are people who harvest a lot more, but I still haven't figured out what strategy those guys use to harvest so much. We can't get all of that here, so in this small space, which isn't even a hectare, it already gives 50,000 reais. 50 sacks at the price of 1,000 reais. If it were 2,000 per sack, it would be 100,000 reais. In a very small space, in 1 hectare, you could plant, who knows, 3,000 coffee plants and reach 150,000 reais in profit in a single hectare. You see, that's something astronomical. So, the guy who has 3 or 4 alqueires will be able to produce a lot and make a lot of money. That's why there are so many people driving fancy cars and with a lot of money, living in luxury, working on the farm. But it's not just for those who are planting, because planting isn't easy. Man, this takes a lot of work to get to this point. It's at least about 2 years of work without having anything, without making any profit. Look at this plan here. For example, look, this little crop was planted in September and now it's February. So you already have September, October, November, December, January, February. That's already 6 months. And look how tiny this thing is. The hope is that at least this crop here, the one we planted first, will at least bloom this year, more toward the end of the harvest. And then if it manages to bloom, we're going to have a small harvest in 2027, which will be terrible to pick because it will be very low. And it's going to be very little, but the real harvest will be in 2028. You see, I planted in 2025 and I'll start harvesting in 2028. All this time is money being invested, it's work being invested to later have a profit. It's not something easy, but there is a faster way for you to make money. Working in the fields. Actually, this isn't the only way for you to get rich in the countryside. There are a lot of people out there making up to 20,000 reais a month at certain times of the year, taking advantage of the coffee hype. And let me explain what happened since the price of coffee went up a lot. People went crazy. They said, no, if you guys are making money, we want to make money too. So the people who pick coffee also raised their prices a lot. And since the supply of labor is very low and the demand is high, it's the worker who sets the price. So, if you decide to work in the fields, if you specialize in an area, you make a lot of money. It's not just those who plant, but also those who work, because labor is scarce. In the past, working in the fields was something you would do as a last resort. It was better to study, to do something different. Working in the fields was only if nothing else worked out, but nowadays it's different. If you leave everything there, your career in the city, and your job there to come work in the fields, most likely you'll make more money in the fields than in the city. Because of supply and demand, what happened was that many people who lived in the countryside moved to the city. This happened in past generations because the countryside was synonymous with hardship and little money. Since many people went there, obviously the supply of labor decreased, and with that, low supply. The price goes way up. So you can easily find work for yourself at any time of the year for at least 150 to 200 reais a day. But you can make much more than that, so let's calculate here using 150. That's already 3,000 reais a month, which is already well above most people. But there are times of the year when you can make up to 20,000 reais a month. That's exactly during the harvest, when people are picking coffee. Going back to what I was saying before, since coffee prices went up a lot, people started charging a lot, and then the price for you to pick coffee became very high, around 50 to 60 reais for each sack you pick. There are people here in my region who easily pick more than 20 sacks a day, so if we calculate 20 there, of course not everyone can do that. The average for a normal person who doesn't overwork and just works regular hours is 13 sacks a day, which is already a lot. That comes out to more than 600 reais a day, but if it's 20, that's 1,000 reais a day. Man, working 20 days a month, that's already 20,000 reais. It's an absurd thing, man. You can make a lot of money during the harvest, and the harvest lasts 3 or 4 months. So just imagine, you'll save up almost 100,000 reais in 3 or 4 months. Can you buy a new car with that? Working in the fields, making that much in just a few months is absurd. It's hard to find anything honest in the city that does the same. That's why I'm saying this. You can get really rich if you take advantage of this hype. Working in the fields makes money nowadays. I think this coffee crisis is going to be a serious problem because the price will drop a lot and then it will start causing losses since the production costs are very high. Let me give you this example here, okay? In total, we planted here, it was 4,000 coffee plants and about 1,000 cocoa plants. There were several mistakes along the way. In a bit, we'll talk about that, about what can happen for you to take a loss. But on average, we spent around 100,000 reais on investment with irrigation. Machinery is work, the labor to help with planting, and just working together, not even counting my own labor, it gets very expensive. It's an investment where you might see profit later on, so it's not simple, and if the price drops too much, it becomes unfeasible. That's why the ideal is to diversify. That's what we did here, not planting just one crop. A lot of people who only grow coffee, if coffee prices drop, they're in trouble, so we diversified with coffee and cocoa. And there's a section with pepper too, which is another crop. It actually brings in more income than coffee per square meter, but it's more expensive to plant. So if you have more, it takes more work, you harvest it many more times a year, and on average it brings in more income per square meter than coffee. And with that, we diversify and don't get stuck. It's like investing. When you invest, you don't put everything into just one thing, you have to invest in several things. So if one goes wrong, you have another, right? So that's the idea. I'll tell you this. So the things that went wrong, even here, there's a weed that's ruining my coffee plants. We just sprayed some herbicide here, and it's starting to dry out the weeds. And there was a really nice little rain today, even with the things that went wrong. The first thing was the irrigation. We made a big mistake, which was buying an irrigation system from a place that was really cheap. We should have been suspicious, and you can even use the irrigation from that place. I can't mention the brand here, otherwise they'll get mad at me, but it's actually a well-known store and it's much cheaper than the others. It already starts off wrong there, because they don't give you a receipt, there's something shady going on, tax evasion, that's why they can sell things cheap, but the brand of pipes they sell is really bad. Man, you have no idea how many times it burst. It was every day the pipe would burst and I had to fix and mess with those terrible pipes. By the way, materials are showing up here out of nowhere. They're going to build a house up here. It can't be possible. So, besides the loss from the pipe, I also wasted a lot of time and missed the initial development of the coffee because the pipe started bursting. Every day I couldn't water properly, some days I didn't water at all, and in the first days it's really important to water a lot, so I struggled with that and then I got screwed because of the pipe. Just so you have an idea, there was a section of about 400 meters that I had to replace. The whole network, man, the entire main line, it can't handle pumping water up here. We have a difference in elevation of about 170 meters and the pipes just couldn't handle it at all. To this day, I'm still facing consequences for not replacing that network section. I hoped it would last and it did briefly, but now it's bursting again. For 3 days straight, a pipe has burst daily and I keep fixing it. I'll have to replace the rest of the network. There's no other option. It works very well in these flat areas here, so there's no problem here because there's no steep slope that would cause the pipe to burst. But when it starts going uphill, it can't handle it. So, what do? To avoid this problem, you need to ask the people around you about that equipment. Don't trust the salesman, man. That's the problem. The salesman will try to sell you. So he'll say the product is good, he'll show you a more expensive product and say it's better. And that doesn't mean much, man. The guy only knows how to sell, he's never worked in the field, he's never dug a ditch to bury a pipe. He doesn't know if it's good but has to sell it, so he'll push it on you. Who can you trust for advice? Neighbors who've already dealt with this. So, will you buy a pipe? Look for someone who already has irrigation in a place at the same altitude as you and check with them which brand of pipe they use. Which one didn't work, which one did. That way you avoid a lot of losses. I estimate that I must have taken at least about 15 to 20,000 reais in losses from the things I'm going to tell you here now. The second thing was the water itself. At first our intention was to have completely clean water to bring up here and irrigate, which would be really good. Through the artesian well, so I had an artesian well made. There were 3 artesian wells. I bought a specific pump for an artesian well, which by the way costs 5 times more than a regular well pump. Man, the price of the specific artesian pump is absurd, and because of that I really got screwed. I spent about 5,000 reais on a pump that I don't even need anymore. Actually, I bought 2 pumps. The loss wasn't even bigger only because I managed to sell the other one, which was the first one. It didn't work out either. It pumped water up here, but it was just a tiny bit. Then I had to buy a stronger, much more expensive version. Eventually, I abandoned those artesian wells and built a dam that cost over 10,000 reais. Look at the loss because of the water, since we weren't sure about the amount of water when it was time to get it. To castrate, even though we needed a lot of water, the water just wasn't enough. The artesian well would drop a lot. It would practically dry up and couldn't handle the watering. It would let in air, melt pipes, burst, and every day it was this struggle, this suffering. That's why the loss with the water was actually one of the biggest. I had to buy another pump, build a dam, and now the dam is also showing signs that it won't be enough. So we set up a rainwater harvesting system, which is also a lot of work. Every time it rains, I have to go there and manage this system to collect the rainwater and direct it into the dam, without letting too much dirt in to clog the pipes and so on. It's a lot of work to take care of this system, but now it's already set up. We just need to maintain it and hope for a lot of rain. So, what's my advice for you if you're just starting out? Focus on the dam, okay? Unless there's really no way, even if you can't build a dam there with a very large water reservoir, then you'll go for the artesian well, those that are 200-300 meters deep, because that's a bit more reliable to get the job done. We dug a 20-meter deep well and it wasn't enough. The water was too shallow, and when the drought gets worse, it's not enough. So you need to prepare all your water. Before, the pump I bought here, which was much more expensive, is a pointed pump, at least that's what we call it here, but it has another name. A lot of people use this pump to inject fertilizer into the crops, and this pump has many stages, so it's much more expensive. If I had bought a pen pump, it would have been much cheaper. I didn't buy it for the artesian well because it was actually a number 3, not an artesian well. So there was no way to interconnect them with a single pump. So it has to be the bicuda because the bicuda draws from the top and pulls from the reservoir. You can use the pen pump, and that's the advantage. The pen pump costs much less. I'll give you an example here. I bought a bicuda pump for, I think it was 4,000 Rs if I'm not mistaken, and there was the pen pump for 1,200. Just so you have an idea of the price difference, sometimes you can buy it much cheaper if it's a pen pump and it has fewer problems. It stays inside the water, you don't need a hose, it's a much more efficient thing. For those working with crops, one thing you're definitely going to need is a motorcycle. There's no way you can keep coming up here every day in a pickup truck. A pickup truck is very important for you to bring basically here to the farm, but the motorcycle is going to be the vehicle you'll use the most. If you're planning to work, whether starting your own farm or working for others, I suggest getting a Biz as it's better for rural areas. Here are some examples. In the front, I can put a 50 kilo bag of fertilizer and ride normally. A regular motorcycle can't do that. Also, you have the trunk, and this trunk here is really cool. Because inside here you can fit a 5-liter water jug that you'll use on the farm. It fits perfectly. You can also carry a 5-liter jug of pesticide, and you can fit a lot of things in here. You have a nice storage compartment. The tank, which is the downside, only holds 4 liters, but 4 liters for this motorcycle is equal to 120 kilometers, so you can manage just fine with this. The other downside is these very low nozzles here, which end up hitting the ground. But on the other hand, it has a high fender, so you won't have to mess with it in the field. It causes a lot of problems, mud, and you have to remove the fender. No need to modify it on the Biz, it already has the fender modified. Oh, and don't forget to put on the rear seat. This is going to be the most useful thing you'll add because I carry seedling boxes, fertilizer, a bunch of stuff. We have a really steep hill here, very hard to climb, and even so, I've already gone up with myself and another 150 kilos of cargo easily on this Biz. So, it has enough power, it's economical, and it's the best motorcycle for you to transport things. And there's one thing you can't miss. Even if you're not going to buy a Biz motorcycle, you have to get a motorcycle that doesn't have a clutch. Many people use the Pop now. It's slightly worse than the Biz since it lacks a trunk, but otherwise they're the same. The new Pops also don't have a clutch. This is extremely important, man, because imagine if one of these pipes bursts up here. How are you supposed to bring a piece of pipe like this up here? With a regular motorcycle, you have to tie it to the back and drag the pipe up. And depending on how far the road is, you're going to damage your pipe. But with the Biz, you can carry it up because you can hold it with your left hand. I've already carried 10 lengths of pipe. They need to be tied well, but 10 1-inch pipes like this in one hand and with the other. You ride the motorcycle because it doesn't have a clutch, so the first thing is, the motorcycle can't have a clutch. Man, people are used to riding motorcycles with a clutch. It's really cool, but for farming, it's better not to have a clutch. You carry a hoe, a stick, whatever you want with your other hand free. You can manage here, but if you have a clutch, it's really bad. But then it's just coffee, cocoa, and pepper that will make money, that will make people rich, or else working in the fields. No, man. There are other ways that are even more profitable than this in a smaller space, but it depends on your region. You need to check what works in your area. For example, here in our region, if we plant vegetables, we can't sell them because there's nothing like what they call a market shed. There are some regions in Brazil that have what's called a market shed, which is a big shed, and there's a person who owns this shed and has some trucks. And this person goes to other people's farms, picks up the vegetables, and takes them to supermarkets and other places. They already have suppliers and everything. You won't be able to do this on your own. I'll harvest my cabbages, load them in the car, and sell them. You can't do it unless you have someone to buy and resell them. Otherwise, it's not scalable. You won't sell 100,000 rays on your own, there's no way, so you need an outlet for that. So, there are regions where it doesn't work. Certain crops here in our region, the vegetables don't work, but in other regions they work very well. And vegetables are good because they can give you a much bigger profit in a small space. So if you take a space of 1 hectare where you plant a certain amount of coffee, you can get maybe 5 or 6 times more profit with vegetables in that same space. That's really cool, man, but you have to see if there's demand. It's no use thinking you can sell it all by yourself. You won't be able to. Let me take a look here and see how things are. The tank is almost full, see? It takes more than 4 hours to fill this tank. Man, I still have to fertilize today. So the right thing to do is to check what works in your region and then plan your strategy. There are many places, for example, where they grow cassava. Here in our region, there's no buyer for cassava either, but if there is in your region, cassava is a business that brings a lot of profit and requires much less work. With vegetables, you plant them and forget about them, and after a year, you can harvest a lot of money, man. There are reports out there. I saw the agronomist De Vera doing some calculations, and if I'm not mistaken, with 1 hectare, he was able to make 1 million reais from cassava. It's a tough business. You need the right supplies and proper planting techniques. You can't just plant and wait. It requires planning. Actually, everything works that way, right? If you don't plan, it won't work very well. No matter the crop, you need to research everything beforehand for things to work out. Now let me give you some little tips for those of you who are just starting out. First thing, this right here makes my life a lot easier. These 200-liter drums here are much cheaper than a water tank, and I have them at several points here in the plantation. So when you're spraying pesticide, you just go over there, fill it up with water, and keep going. If it weren't for this, you'd need a car with a water tank on top out here. You'd need to drive the car close to the crop to spray pesticide, which is bad. You waste a lot of time with that and still spend money on a car. Maybe you don't even have a car, or either way, you'll spend fuel like that, which you don't need to. The irrigation water itself fills the small tanks there, and we can work with the irrigation, we can mix fertilizer, we can do a lot of things with that. Here, so it's a tip that will save you a lot of time. One thing that went really wrong for us here was the freezing agent. A lot of people are using it and I thought it was cool, but it didn't work for us. We spent a lot of money on the freezing agent and used it here. Look, in the rows, and it didn't work. The rows didn't stay clean. They were supposed to be spotless, with no weeds at all. But if you're lucky, just one spot or another like here, look, is still clean. You need to see it at the beginning, man. Over there, at the start, it's terrible. The amount of weeds there, it didn't solve anything. The freezing agent was just a waste of money. Another thing that's falling out of use are these little tents. There used to be many here since people came to work in the fields. Without motorcycles, they walked so they wouldn't have to return home for lunch. And they had these little tents here. Imagine if there was nothing, they'd have to stay on the ground. There's no way. These little tents here are for you to get under. They've saved me from the rain before. You can leave things under here like fertilizer and stuff. This is something very useful. I suggest you set up a few of these in your field. Another tip is to make the most of your available space. If you have a fence on your land, you know, to divide it from your neighbor's property, take advantage of that fence to plant peppers. We did that here. Look, you can see the little pepper plants. This isn't pepper, this is just weeds. Look, there's the pepper plant, down there is another pepper plant, and here's another one. This one's actually pretty big. So, along the entire length of the fence, there are pepper plants. That means you can fit a lot of pepper plants in a space you wouldn't normally use. You can't plant coffee here, but you can plant pepper. It'll climb the fence, wrap around, and you'll make it work. Harvesting pepper is something that's really profitable, so even if you plant just a few plants, you're already going to get some really great results, man. And it's some extra money for you to cover fertilizer, pay for some pesticide, or any other expense you might have during the harvest. You cover those costs with this business that was created in a space that used to be wasted, making the most out of every area. In short, you can get really rich in the countryside, but you need planning and strategy. If you have that, man, if you prepare yourself for this new world, this new reality, where those who work in the countryside are the ones who made it. You can make a good profit from this, but it won't happen overnight. It will take hard work and time, but you can achieve it. And if you want to see more videos like this, giving you tips, you can leave it here in the comments and also comment here with any questions you have. We'll keep talking, exchanging ideas. I know there are a lot of people out there who are much more experienced than I am. I'm still pretty new in this area, so we can keep exchanging ideas in the comments. See you in the next video.